Cool. All right. So stand in this area.
Oh,
You guys ready?
Yes.
yeah.
Cool. Let's do it. So welcome to Ansir Co-work. It is very nice to see everybody here. This is amazing. We just opened about a month ago, maybe almost 2 months. And long history of Ansir co-working. It used to be Ansir Innovation Center across the street, and it is now co-work because COVID and all that stuff. So new building, new place, it's a little bit smaller, but we have big ideas and big dreams to be more than that. So welcome to the first meetup here. This is the very first. I want to welcome Dan and Sam to this lovely meetup. Thank you everybody for showing up. And so we have the so we have the ideas to business. So I'll just turn it over to Dan and let you start talking.
All right, how's everybody going? This is my first in-live presentation since the pandemic. I know. It's weird not being behind a camera or in Zoom. So Sam and I met at the Tech Coffee on Tuesdays, and kind of a bunch of conversations, Milan started this space, and we're like, hey, we need to just get the community just more engaged, and we just said, hey, why don't we just start giving talks, figure that out. There's a lot of startups Sam and I talk to at these meetups, so we're always having these one-on-ones with people, and so we're trying to just see if things we talk about can be to a larger audience instead of just repeating the same information to people over and over again. So at least that's why I'm here. Sam, do you have any
Basically, yeah, we have ability to speak to people, right? Usually on one-on-one, and the idea is actually to talk to people at co-working spaces where there are people working on things, right? And so what we do is we kind of pass on our personal experience with our clients to people individually. This way we can kind of do small mini lessons for people in co-working spaces over beers, bring people together and advance, I guess, push people in San Diego to do better, I guess.
Yep. So people have a lot of ideas, they just need some guidance, and there's a lot of people that can give it. So we're trying to make sure that, we connect everybody. All right, so let's see. Oops.
What is that a picture of?
Which one?
Your background.
Oh, this? The bank?
No, your background on your computer.
Oh, this? Oh, I'm not sure. It's unsplashed, so.
Oh, that's really cool.
Alright, so how to capitalize on your ideas. We all have ideas, so many of them, but to actually get them to a product, just try to get money, that's the tricky part. I mostly work with enterprise companies, so startups, it's just something that I meet when I'm around the community, but the one thing about enterprise, right, is they have so much money, they can just do 10,000 things. So the thing about a startup, though, is that you probably have no money, and you need to prioritize very heavily. So here's just some things I take from the enterprise world and sharing it, with all of you to try to get you to prioritize easier. So who am I? So I'm a technical coach mostly now, which I'll explain in a second, but I've mostly been a software developer. I've been coding since I was 8. I actually got into the hacking scene at 12, and then my career started in computer security. So to this day, I still do pen testing, but it's, whenever my friends call me to help them for a gig. So technical coaching. So I got into that because I just ended up mentoring a lot, and then I kind of just eased from stopping working on code for companies and helping people. So I kind of just transitioned that direction. Plus all my colleagues that I've worked with, they've shifted to technical coaching too, so we kind of just ended up there. So what is technical coaching? So I get brought in to help development teams, usually with some engineering aspect, but mostly bridging engineering with product. So one of the biggest issues with enterprises is they have all this engineering power, but they're not aligned with the product vision of the company. So because of that mismatch, development's happening that's not aligned with where the company wants to go, or there's product ideas that aren't happening, sales is not getting what they need. There's all this unalignment, and so that's what I get brought into. So I usually work with a product coach who's on the other side of the equation, and we are paired up. There's things called dojos that I usually work in, and so these dojos are like these 6-week immersive experiences where a development team will come in, and it's like kind of their playground, but they're doing real work, but they get to make all the adjustments they want to find a better flow to their process, and so like as coaches, we either drive initially, but then eventually they start to take the steering wheel, and then we just kind of jump in when they need some help. My passion project has mostly been with what I call creative intelligence. So what I've noticed is the reason we don't like meetings, the reason we get tired at work, is because our creativity is like shot. Like there's no creativity left. So I'm trying to figure out ways to get that back into companies. And you'll see this when we have a greenfield project. Developers love greenfield, right? It's like creativity, like go nuts. But then you get to maintain this old legacy piece of code, and everybody just hates their job. So I want to keep that curiosity going and that empathy going with each other. And interactions are like the most important thing to me. So one thing I've noticed is teams that work in silos, like individually, like all the interactions with their team members is like killing like that creativity, right? They're not getting ideas, they're not sharing, and they're always, in a sense, reacting to issues that they're causing with each other because they're not in sync. So there's that. And then a lot of the utilities and tools I'm trying to work on are just shortcutting ideas to like reality. So one of the things I'm looking at now is why do the people that prototype or design things not just implement? Because we're now in an era where prototyping effort is about the same as implementing, so we can bridge that gap. All right, so if you have an idea, the question you should ask, is there a product behind the idea? Because if there isn't, you need to step back and think about, well, where can somebody like pay for services, or how I can get this funded? Because one thing I've learned in my life is you might not want to solve a problem for money, but if you don't have money, you will not be able to solve the problem. So that's just a reality, right? Sure, you can have another job, but reality is if you can get funded to do your idea, that just all flows better. So really it just comes down to validate your assumptions, right? So out of any part of the process, you have a lot of assumptions. You need to just validate as many as you can so that you know that you're headed the right direction. So the first step in this process is product thinking. And we've heard probably MVP from this list, but there's a lot of M something Fs and M something Ps. Quickly go over these. There's minimum viable feature, viable product, marketable feature, and marketable product. This is kind of in an order, right? So if you're just starting with an idea from scratch, you are probably just looking at that first feature that's going to be valuable to somebody, and then try to make it a product. But once you have a product, you then need to work on the features that's going to make it marketable, and then once it's marketable, that's where revenue can usually start to come in. So yeah, here's the M's. So define your goals. So the most important thing that most people don't do is get a target customer. Because most ideas I hear is like, everyone is a customer, everyone is. And the problem with that is that the feedback from there is really hard to know the details and the nuances of why it's good, right? Because if it's too wide, you just have too many perspectives. So even if you have a large pool of customers you can go after, you want to pick one target. And it's okay, right? Because trust me, the next day or the next week, you can just go to the next customer or the next target, right? But once you have that, then you need to know what problem do they need solved and what do they want? So you need to ask these questions, because if you just think your idea is the best idea ever and you're just driving forward and they don't understand, they don't have anything in these two spaces, it's just gonna fall flat. Now, you might be ahead of your time. That's the other thing, right? A lot of companies have had great ideas. They were just 2 or 3 years ahead of their time, and then they missed the mark. So you need to kind of call those out very quickly. I'm going to share here in a second some methods and a project that I just did the last 2 weeks with a friend of mine, a product coach, funny enough, and talk about the failures that we went through, because even though we teach this stuff, when you're in it, it's really hard to remember all these things. So once you figure out the goals, you want to be prioritizing. And I'm sharing a method here called the Moscow method, which is, once you lay out your goals and what you're going to go after, you can then get these buckets of like, what are the must-haves to do, the should-haves, the could-haves, and the won't-haves. And this kind of like gives you a quick overview that's not categorized specifically by can the tech work or does customer want. These are just very generic buckets that let you know, yep, we're going to go after this green bucket and life is good. All right. So, product thinking has a lot of exercise, and this is what's called the unstuck map, which I don't know why I had to split there. Does anybody know how to unsplit? I don't know how to unsplit. All right. So this thing is called the unstuck map. It's the thing I first recommend to everybody because this has a lot of the questions you probably asked and guides you to some exercise that you should probably try out. There's many, and to share what those exercises are, I have these physical cards that you can just pass around and look at your own leisure. But that's a whole stack of the exercises and more that are on this unstuck map. Yeah, it's not product stuff. Yes. All right, so I'm going to show now. This is an example of a real whiteboard of us going through some of these exercises. And you can see my buddy tried to start just writing with an iPad. I couldn't understand that, but we were attempting it and trying to see if there was a product fit or market fit there. And then, we did this business model canvas, which again, these are all those cards. Now, this is what's funny. This buddy of mine is a product coach. So he teaches other teams to find the highest priority to go after. But just like all humans, he just stacked we must do this, this, and this. And we end up having way too many things that he's trying to solve. And then I had to be the voice of reason and say hey, you're not listening to your own philosophy. But it's very easy to fall into that trap. All right.
Jan, is that a tool that you have with little post-its on there and little boxes and stuff?
Oh, so this tool right here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so this is Miro. Miro, and there's another one called Miro. They're the two popular virtual whiteboarding tools that people use. There's also Figma, which you will see as well, but that one might not be used by people anymore.
I thought we loved Adobe.
Yeah. We do, as long as they don't charge us a whole lot. So we'll see. All right, so we get into prototyping once we figure out, the thing that we're going to go after. So what I love about prototyping, right, is that this is where your idea starts to become reality. And the key part I have in your first prototype or any prototype really is to do it quick and dirty. Do not invest a whole lot into it. Just get it so that you can interact with the idea. So instead of just talking about it, whiteboarding it, you want something that's tangible where you can click things, go through some flows, but you need to feel the transitions, right? So here's kind of the range that I'd like people to see for good enough prototyping. Now I don't have where you need to land on here. This is just so that you think about where your efforts are going to go. So here's your prototype disposable. So is it okay to just throw away after you're done with the prototype? Or do you want to hear for life? Because maybe your prototype is a working, piece of functionality and that's okay. Error handling. So, how much time do you invest in making sure the user's in the right boundaries? I usually lean towards use at your own risk because, again, if the feedback I get isn't valuable, then I'm just tossing it. And I don't want to invest in protecting you at every form, field, and every input. Engineering practices, right? So do you test, do you, refactor your code, all these things. Again, I lean towards hacking more, but, if you need to be compliant, then you can go full on engineering practices to pass compliance. That's fine too. Data is an interesting one. So this one is basically, do you have demo data? Do you want every user that you're getting feedback for to start from a fresh state, or are they all collaborate? Are they always just going into a system that just has data growing in it? The story for me here is that this thing that we're making is a meeting tool to determine if your meetings are good by rating you, and then determining if you need help, right? And so what we learned with the data is that they were testing, the organizers that were trying to get ratings for their meetings were testing the rating, so their ratings were actually corrupting their rating results, right? Because they were contributing to it, and we didn't accommodate for that, so we didn't, reset them correctly. Analytics, this is probably the most important thing about your prototype, is you do need to know something get some feedback about the usage of it. So, you can go all the way to don't know what they did or what happened to, you're stalking them. And there are tools that can literally watch every user behavior, every click, every mouse move, right? So just kind of know where you land there. And then branding's the other one, right? If you have a brand, you might want to put some branding in because you want it to stick some, but if you don't have one, then, just don't worry about the branding aspect, right? Anything there? Good. All right, so mock-up versus working prototype. So in this example, we actually found someone that's a friend of a friend whose daughter is getting into design, and so she needed a project, and so we just asked her to make mock-ups. This is Figma, so she made mock-ups of this idea to, have people get started on a meeting, and then get their special link to get ratings, and then, then they could get their ratings and see what the average ratings were, and then the feedback, right? So, I don't know, this took her maybe 2 hours at most, I think, to get this up and going. So this would have just been good enough to get feedback on. But my buddy wanted a working prototype, so that's where So I'm just sharing this. You do not need to read this code, but what I want to show you is that this is one file of a working prototype that's almost 1,500 lines of code. Now, why am I able to make a working prototype in one file and not get lost? That's because we have AI now, and this is 80% AI generated, just to be clear. It's the content itself is me putting it in, but the code itself is mostly driven by AI, just me guiding it very quickly. So it's very easy for me to just sequentially dump the behavior that I wanted. And so I say that because we now have technology to make working prototypes a lot faster than we used to, and this is now capable.
Copilot?
This is Copilot,
Ah.
yeah.
Good for Microsoft.
Yep. I can share a bunch of tips and tricks with Copilot. It's a different talk. So we decided to go that route because my buddy was going to a conference, and he was going to share this and get a lot of feedback, with everybody he met. So that's what we kind of decided. We could have left it at mock-ups, but we went working, and the investment was very small. So, and the key part here is observability. So another thing we learned in this is I did not put special page titles on the pages. So when we looked at metrics, a lot of these metrics tools, although they do have the path, that's more of an advanced capability, they like to segment everything by page title. But all our page titles were the same. So we learned a lesson there, and we wanted to accommodate for that. Which goes to feedback. So the whole goal with these prototypes is to get feedback. So we want to be able to understand if what we're doing, we want to keep going, or it's not a product fit, it's not worth it, we want to do more of it, we want to do something else. But the important part here with feedback is a time frame. So this is the question most people don't answer. It's how much time do we want to spend getting feedback? Now the reason this is important is because as a human, when something goes wrong, it's in our nature to want to fix it right away. The thing with these prototypes is you don't want to fix it unless it's critical, if it's killing the prototype. You just want to sit for 2 days, 3 days, whatever your window is, just collect feedback. Do not react to it, just have that time frame. And because once you get it, then you start to put all the feedback into different buckets of what people like, what their criticisms are, what questions they have, what ideas they have. there's this concept called affinity mapping. That's probably the thing you're going to do, which is taking all the feedback and grouping them like in similarities. And so once you have this feedback, then the next thing you do is then you can decide, like, you know, do we go after the things that people liked more? Do we take the criticism? Do we adjust, right? If there's questions, this is the part that we're kind of at, we're answering questions, right? So that's another thing is, while you're collecting feedback, you don't have to respond to everybody right away, right? Because you're gonna learn more as you start to observe, and your answers to questions will be better after the feedback versus in the moment. And then ideas, right? Almost everybody that cares to try the prototype has another idea. Like, that's almost guaranteed. And so, you know, you go nuts there. So the other key part here is turn up the good. So this is a quote from a buddy of mine who, this is literally all he does. Is after he does retrospectives or he does, you know, reviews or has people collaborate, he just says, call out all the good things and let's just do more of that. Which, you know, sounds good to me. I like that philosophy. I've tried it. And then rinse, repeat. Practice, practice, practice. So you need to get this to be muscle memory, right? Because what's really hard is we want to just do the next thing. We want to finish. We want to get complete. But when you start getting used to the feedback cycle, it's actually easier to like believe in the system of we need the feedback in order to make sure that our efforts actually are, you know, put in the right priority versus like just flailing around trying to keep up with, you know, what we believe is right. This cycle will actually get you aligned with the correct priority. I guess is the way to say it. I'm fading now. So I want to share this. Let's see, where's my love that my browser just like disappeared. Where did
It happens.
I know, where did it go? Demo fail. No. So I want to talk about the other part of ideas and prototyping, where if you want to capitalize, this is the unfortunate part. You will need contracts and you will need agreements. So what you're seeing here is an example of an agreement we have with facilitators to match them up with the people that are rating their meetings if they need help to make them better. And so we had to do the hard work of deciding, you know, what's the commission we're gonna take or stuff like that. This is not the fun part, but unfortunately, this, if you want to try to make money, you have to go to this part. That's true for privacy policies in terms of use, terms of conditions. They're just all part of the thing. So that's the unfortunate non-fun side that you have to go after. And then, so, and that's it.
How long is one of your kind of, when you enter a company, right, the process? How long are you with them? How long does it take for, I guess, your guidance to work together?
So if they're dojos, they're usually 6 weeks long.
Okay.
At a time per team. Most enterprise engagements are like 3 months, but that's many teams going through a 6-week cycle. And then there's other things where they're just like workshops, so those can be 2 days to a week. But yeah.
How much feedback would you say is enough to start trying to get some kind of data out of it? Like, how much should you be looking for?
Yeah, so what I like to look at is when I see something that wasn't something I thought about, which isn't always going to happen, but if you get enough people, you usually get some perspective that you didn't think about, and that's about the time I start to shift. But if everything's kind of aligned to the idea, I start to question, did we test it enough, right? Like if your prototype is giving you the feedback you completely expected, there's probably a boundary you didn't push farther enough, and that's where I would try to like reach. And again, it's not that you don't have an idea that's like perfectly aligned, but it's rare in my experience that you get it right.
You're not gonna do it right.
Right. So. Anything else? Cool. Thank you, everyone.